everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Welcome to the Route 3 podcast. My name is Tommy, and I'll be your host. My goal is to fill the world with real and honest conversation along and about the road of life. Sometimes things are going to get deep. Sometimes they're going to get funny. But it's always authentic. So buckle up. Let's go. Hey guys, welcome back. Route 3 podcast. I'm back pretty quick this time. It's only been about a week. Super excited. Today we have Richard Bird. Richard is a speaker. He is a father. He is a City of Westerville board member. And all around great dude. I loved hearing about his experiences as a parent and as a man with a career and just about things in life in general. We get pretty serious. He talks a little bit about his late wife and how he's moved on and how he's done things and how that's, in fact inspired him, it's an amazing story. I love hearing from him, love seeing what he's doing, and it's such a pleasure and such an honor to have someone like this on the podcast. You guys will enjoy it. False alarm. I thought I had this thing started. Turns out I didn't. So I had a nice little opening, and I'm going to try to replicate it here in just a second. So today with us on the podcast, we have Richard Bird, who I've known for quite some time, but never really had the chance to have him captive. And one of the things I kind of admire about Richard is he's in a different stage in his life than I am. I'm more into my kids are 4 and 6, and Richard's kids are college or beyond, and just kind of in that different moment. So I'm always kind of dreaming of the moment when my kids are leaving me, but at the same time trying to enjoy the moment because I know it's not going to last forever. Richard's kind of at his golden age, and I really enjoy, hearing things that he has to say, and, probably in his shoes, he's probably going to tell me hold on to what you got. Don't.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can definitely hold on to what you have. It's not going to go away. I mean, it just continues to age and mature and develop. Your relationship with your children changes as they become adults. And you just, you figure it out. But I find it funny, my golden years are just all by accident. I mean, I stumbled and tripped and failed and struggled my way to this point. And I think a lot of people that see me on the street sometimes don't, put all the different stories and the pieces and the components together. And a great example is just today I was getting a dent fixed in a car, and I mentioned that the dent had been put there by my oldest son, who's 32 years old. and I had the guy behind the counter looked at me and he goes, "You have a 32-year-old kid?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What, do you have him when you were 12? And I said, "No." I said, "I was an 18-year-old dad." And I think that there's a tremendous amount of hardship and challenge and difficulty for anybody that goes down that path.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say choose it. It was something that happened. There were decisions that needed to be made, and I made decisions to be a dad at 18.
Yeah.
And then I wasn't smart enough to figure it out, and I was a dad again before I was 21 years old. And the benefit to me is now I've got 4 children. My youngest going now off to college this summer, and I'm a young guy.
Yeah.
And it's I love that from the standpoint of enjoying life. Like you said, the golden part of, hopefully not the, a short golden part of the curve of the rest of my life, but to be able to really enjoy and capitalize and be young while I get the opportunities to do other stuff has been, it's taken some adjustment to get used to. I was walking in Kroger's the other day, and I was like, wow, I'm going to get home and there's no kids. Nobody's coming home.
Yeah.
Those are the small adjustments that you make. But then, my kids reach out to me in FaceTime or, Messenger video, and it's a different, daily routine, but it doesn't go away. So what you have now that's great and you love, about being a parent, being a dad, being with kids and family, it just gets better.
Yeah. So what would you say is is there a certain lesson or an overwhelming like philosophy that you would tell parents or tell yourself at an earlier age to kind of, I don't know, I don't want to say comfort them, but help them know it's either going to be okay or.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because I kind of qualify myself as like the world's worst parent, and it's because I think that I was born cynical. I don't think that I actually developed it. I just think that I just came fully formed, as a cynic, and I always used to tell the kids as I was raising them that that they needed to understand that I understood the game, and that game was being a parent is psychological warfare, and I told them that. They needed to understand if it was going to be an all-out war, not only did I understand it was a war, but I was in it to win.
Yeah.
So I tell people that one of the best gifts that you can give your children as a parent is telling them no, is to set the boundaries. And when you set a boundary, provide a gate, right? Provide opportunities for kids to go to that next place that they want to go to. It's a sleepover with a friend, and I don't know that friend's parents, or it's am I old enough to have a cell phone now, or am I old enough to have a social media account now? Not placing walls, but creating guardrails for a child, and then creating gates that hey, once we get to this point, or once you've shown that you can do this, or once you've given me the confidence and the comfort that I know that you're going to call me before you go to sleep, when you're at a sleepover, just to check in, then then yes, we can do these things. Yeah. But it's, I think a lot of people have had this bad, perception that the advent of millennial kids and everything like that has been, it's been like, it's the kids. And I'm like, no, it's not the kids. The kids are all right, right? Literally, like the kids are all right. It's the fact that we've got a culture now where it's very difficult for parents to tell children just very factually, very bluntly, no. And that's the best gift that you can give a child, because when a child becomes an adult, as we know, life is full of frustrations requiring patience, lots of no's, tons of challenges and issues that we don't get what we want most of the time. And it's really important to condition a child to be prepared for that. And like I used to, share with a lot of people in a different setting, I would say, look, if you're not building your children to go, that's the worst possible scenario you can create for yourself. And people ask me, like, what do you mean build your children to go? And I'm like, so you ever sent your kid to an overnight camp or an extended summer camp? No, I couldn't do that. Well, why not? Well, they'll be homesick. They're 8, they're 9, they're 10 years old. It is a tremendous gift to prepare your child for independence by giving them those opportunities to go to those types of activities where they have to learn independence. And they're going to be sad and they're going to cry and they're going to be like, hey, you abandoned me, mom and dad. And, but it's that guardrails with a safe gate, because obviously you're going to have staff and those types of things. And building my children to go when it came time for them to leave, either to school or to, in my youngest case, all the way to England to go to college. It was like, hey, no big deal. Like, I'm going to be cool because I've been cool for a number of years now on my own in these settings. So I know that I'm going to be okay.
That's a repeated pattern for you, though. Like, 4 kids, like, if that's kid number 1, you're going to be freaking out a little bit more, right? Yeah, kid number 1. Yeah, I mean, so I was in the 82nd Airborne Paratroopers, and they always said that the first guy to go out the door was called the wind dummy. And so the first kid, and I'm an oldest kid, so I know this for a fact, the first kid is always the one that is the test patient. And that is interesting, because I'll tell you, later on in life, those of us that have been the oldest child, we know that we have been the test patient, and there's sometimes some grudges and some, like, hey,
like the youngest got a cell phone when they were 12, and I'm like, well, technically cell phones were still in a bag, with when you were a kid. But yeah, I mean, it's tougher with the first child, and it is a learned and a repeated pattern behavior. But if you're unwilling to give your children that controlled freedom to go, when it comes time for them to leave, I mean, I have lots of friends and colleagues that are in the same situation as me, either the same age or a little bit older with children gone, and it's crazy. It's like, kids still basically living at home, didn't want to go to college any further away than across the street.
Yeah.
Which is fine, right, if that works. But if that's the choice, not because I'm not capable or I feel uncomfortable or I'm not able to go do this because it would mean it would be so foreign or scary that I can't do it. That should never be the roadblock that we want our children to face, right? It should be, I want you to make good choices. And if you say, hey, I want to go across the street to college because it's got the best engineering program ever, cool. By the way, you're not going to live with me because you've got to go out and learn how to do things like your laundry, like, on your own. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see the challenges it creates and the emotional challenges it creates for families when they didn't build their kids to have independence. So
no, that's very interesting because I mean, I was joking with my buddy either today at work or the other day about the whole millennial conversation and how that seems to just be a general, like just a smackdown for a baby boomer to kind of like distort the youth as being kind of misled or not being right. And I think to myself, jokingly, and maybe not so much jokingly, I'm like, well, so baby boomers, you mean the ones that completely bankrupted the country and ruined so many other things? Let's talk about all the things you didn't get right before you start, passing that. Yeah. But that's a joke, kind of. And then the other way I think about that is, when I was probably 9 or 10, and that's a good example because I grew up with a single mother. My dad passed away when I was like 6 years old, and they had divorced before that, and he was kind of abusive and wasn't really the greatest. But when I hear his backstory, I have a little bit more understanding of how certain people get to be a certain way. Yeah, they're not just abusive because they're assholes.
Right. No, that's true.
Something has happened before. And just like, when we raise our kids, it's almost like I'm trying to half out the problems that I had in my being raised and just make it a little bit better.
Yeah.
But no, I was in Boy Scouts and we went on a camp and I remember being homesick the first time when I'm 2 states away from my mom, and I'm not really like missing my mom, but it's almost kind of like caterpillar to butterfly moment and you don't realize it because you have to go through kind of that whole anxiety push.
Yeah.
And there's a point around that time when I realized that I was kind of on my own. That even though my mom was, fronting bills and filling the, cupboards and whatnot, everything was really up to me.
Yeah.
At like 10, 11 years old. No one's going to come and save me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you wanted to get out, it's going to be on me.
Yeah. No, I think that's fascinating, to you kind of reel that back in your own head and just go, hey, I'm realizing now that I had this moment, my own little 9 or 10-year-old Rubicon, right? And I had to cross it, to get to the other side. The millennial thing, I got to come back to it because I find it fascinating. To me, the current millennial argument really is nothing more than a social media enabled, hey kid, get off my lawn, kind of thing. And because I've always said this, like, I did a significant stint of my career at JP Morgan Chase, and I hired a lot of interns who are these millennial kids. And people are always like, millennials this, millennials that. And I'm like, well, I hired, people that are now, VPs and SVPs. These kids were straight Johnny Hustle, and they had a better awareness and understanding of the world in total because of the access to, this huge amount of information in the digital age. And, I kind of go back and go, I don't think Julius Caesar stood on the floor of the Senate and said, hey, this next generation that's coming behind me, these kids are going to be pretty cool. Like every generation, and it's a skip gap thing. You mentioned the baby boomers. It's a skip gap thing where it's always the generation two ahead of that youngest functional generation that are the target.
Okay.
Right. And, because I'm a Gen Xer, right? I was just outside of that boomer border. And, so I'm an older, part of that group of folks. But we look at, we're really skeptical and cynical about the whole baby boomer population, because if you worked in industries and in technology like I did for so long, you knew that virtually no baby boomers were founders of any of the most successful companies, the new companies, right? The baby boomers were still plugging away at Big Blue, right? The baby boomers were still working at Hewlett Packard or Unisys or Digital, and it wasn't. It was the Gen Xers that were coming in behind. Frankly, men and women my age now.
It's like mold makers or mold existers and then mold breakers.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that kind of gets back to your same thing. I don't think it's much. I'm not poking fun when I say, hey, baby boomers, you showed everyone how to overconsume, and you showed everyone how to, really take what that greatest generation, which was the generation before, built from bootstraps up, and GI Bills, and going to school, and Sears and Roebuck houses, and just working hard, and there's a whole lot of squandering in that generation.
Yeah.
And I think it's unfortunate because there's a whole lot of memory loss about that as well, and there's just, and there's this, complete forgetfulness about, what those late 60s and early 70s look like, forgetting all of the big historical things, but everything that was going on at the time, just forget it all. And, we were getting it right. We weren't making mistakes.
Yeah, of course not.
I mean, it's really frustrating, because I think it discounts the huge potential that the millennials and now, that next generation that's behind them, which they came up with a new name for them recently. I can't remember what it is.
The new ones. I know there's Zillennials, which is like the blend of
X.
And I'm technically I'm in that because I read this today, and it's like you got to go through your adolescence with AOL. But you never really, they said you never really got to the sexting part of your adolescence.
No, it just got cut off before you even got there. Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so true, because I remember the old days of just searching the internet. I've always been just fascinated by, I could read encyclopedias. I go to the library and I'm like, ooh, let's look at E.
Yeah.
And I'm just rolling through them, and then they have the internet, and I'm like, this is all here.
Yeah.
You can get lost on that thing for hours upon hours.
Yeah, well, that's one of my favorite memes of all time about the internet was the vast universe of all digital knowledge available at your fingertips, and we still use the internet to send cat memes and watch porn. Like it's true that like in no time in the age of human beings has there ever been so much immediately accessible information. And I'm going to differentiate between information and news, because that's just a whole different can of worms, right? But so much information that's available, and really, frankly, how little of it we capitalize on. It just is, it's nuts. You think here's so much now that's knowable. Like I used to have tons of books, because I do all kinds of home improvements, and I love, working with my hands and working on cars and everything. And I used to have books for all of that stuff. Now it's just like, hey, how do I change or fix the timing on my, 63 wagon? Let me pull up a YouTube video while I'm sitting right in front of the car.
Yep.
Okay, we take and put the light there. The accessibility of this information now has so much potential, but I think it's pretty much untapped currently compared to where it's going to be in the next 20 years.
From a percentage perspective, I completely agree, because I see so many people that get dumbfounded by the most seemingly simple problems, and I think, why don't you just Google it or YouTube it, or like somebody out there has failed at this or has perfected it, and they're going to show you that by how many views they have, and so. You don't have to be a big dumb animal all the time. Cat memes are fun.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can't watch a video and do it, then maybe you should just rethink doing it at all. Like, with the exception of tying a bow tie. I want to be real clear about that. I watched bow tie tying videos for like 4 days because every single bow tie tying video on YouTube misses one incredibly important step because they can't show it on the camera, which is how you pass it through on the back.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if there is one flaw in the entire YouTube instructional video universe, it's bow ties.
They got to make a cartoon for that then.
Yeah.
You can go like ultra 3-dimensional with
exactly
with graphics or drawings, way better. But no, I'm always that stuff baffles me. Even when I'm, I think that even people my age or younger, I'm like, what? People get dumbfounded by answers and they'll just sit there and they're like, you never know. I'm like, I want to say, dummy, just Google it or just search it. There's somebody out there has that information.
Yeah, the laws of probability would suggest that it is absolutely impossible that you're the first person in history to ever face this problem. But we do. We even with the expansiveness of digital accessibility, the fascinating thing about human beings is we think that every single event, transaction, or moment that we're going through is unique to just us. We literally think like there's nobody else that's ever gone through this, and like then we show up in some place and we start talking about it, and like 30 people in the room are like, oh yeah, that totally happened to me too, and we're like dumbfounded because we're like, how could that possibly be? I don't know, the fact that there are billions of people on the planet.
So many of us.
Yeah,
there's so many of us, and we're so bored. We don't have to watch cat memes. Man. No, that's so unique. Because it was very interesting. My current manager, he is in a wheelchair, crashed, accident. I think he's 38, 39. Mm-hmm. Had a car wreck, broke neck. Mm. But just I enjoy hearing him, and I've told him my story, and I'm always amazed. I love people with compassion that at least listen to a story and don't wait to interject, because I sometimes I think that's what the world, especially that's some of the problem with the internet and the attention. It's like, no, me, pick me. Yeah. I want to talk. Yeah. I want to talk louder than you. And compassion is such a great thing. This guy who has had no use from basically diaphragm down is playing softball. Yes. Is chopping wood, is with a chainsaw, of course. Mm-hmm. And there's just so many things that we don't consider to be just consider, period, like going to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. and they would have to either catheter or they have to do certain things that are just, it's unspeakable or unthinkable to us. Mm-hmm. Compassion is just one of those things that I think people, I don't know if they lack. Maybe they just don't understand how important it is.
Well, I think that it's, and this is something that you definitely learn from being a parent, right? The most consistent behavior pattern that you'll see with your children, and this may continue on well into their adult years, but certainly when they're small, is there's no empathy, right? There's no capacity to think about things outside of how they impact or I impact them.
Yeah.
So it's the center of the universe principle, right? I am in the middle of the universe and everything rotates around me. And some of that gets, much more focused, as, children reach certain ages. The early middle teen years is like pretty much the worst for that. And what is interesting is that that's just a fundamental characteristic of all human beings on the planet.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating from what I do for a living in cybersecurity, because I tell people all the time that there is nothing in the digital that is not a representation of the analog. And this is incredibly important because the analog, the real world, the tangible world, is not only where we reside, but it's where we apply our brains. And there's like all the scientific studies that we've heard for years and years and years. We're still only using 10 to 12% of our available, brain horsepower. So what that means is that we're incapable of creating the things that we don't understand, don't know, haven't experienced or seen, because we're not using but 10% of our brain. So all we can do is create things in the digital that are representations of what we understand in the real world. They move faster, speed of light, packets, all that good stuff. It moves faster. The volume can be greater, but it's no different, right? And so when we look at in the analog, where people are just really ridiculously self-centered, have no capability to put themselves in somebody else's shoes, that empathetic bone, then we look on the internet and we know that digital is a reflection of the analog, just faster. We shouldn't be surprised at how ugly and foul and frustrating and unhelpful interactions are on the internet relative to interpersonal things, because it's just as ugly in the real world. It's just faster, more present, more available in the digital streams. We're just, as in the big damn animal piece, we're really selfish creatures. And once we learn how to break through that, what you said, about your observations about your manager, I love that, because there was a time in my life where we'd have a conversation and it was like, cool, bro. Like, so yeah. I did this. Like, that's cool that you did that, but have you done this, right? Now where I find myself in life is much more fascinated by people, just totally fascinated by everybody, their uniqueness, their capabilities, what their accomplishments, no matter how small. Like you said, I worked with Team Some Assembly Required in the CrossFit community, and actually had an athlete that I worked with and coached, amputee, and spent time around the athletes in that community. And same as you, I'm staggered. I'm thinking about how cool it is to get, 135 pounds overhead.
Yeah.
And then I'm watching a guy with literally no rib cage, born with no arm and shoulder structure on one side, putting, 100 plus overhead with one arm.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the reality is that in the non-empathetic, self-centered space, I could look at that and go, I just suck, right? I'm so depressed and I need to work harder. Or I could look at it and just from the completely empathetic standpoint and go, that is astounding. And I want to be around that energy. I want to lift it again, dude. I want to see you break through and be successful and do what you do, because I just want to witness it.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of absence of this fascination with how amazing human beings really are, because we're so focused on ourselves.
Yeah, it's I think about their energy. It's like if you're seeing somebody do that, you recognize their energy because you know how much, I guess, potential or work had gone into that. Mm-hmm. And then you want to be around that because that makes me go, I think I've got it bad. They've got it worse. And they're constantly pushing for better. Yeah. I want to push for better too.
Well, that's a great point. And I there was a learning that I went through that as I worked with that community. There's a great coach, Jason Sturm, who's out Old Glory CrossFit out in the East Coast. He worked extensively with a guy named Chef, who's really legendary in this adaptive athletics movement. And as we went through a certification course around working with adaptive athletes, Jason pointed out something that I knew but never really resonated from my experience in the military, which was, hey man, I'm not your superhero. I'm not your role model. And I'm like, he's just like, I'm trying to get up in the morning and lift the weight just like you. I'm trying to, go to a competition and be successful just like you. It just happens that I've got other things that are, challenging, but it doesn't mean that you don't have things that are challenging. And they're just challenging in a different plane, in a different dimension. And we look at those kind of things that seem monumental and epic to us. And that kind of gets back to that point about the challenge there is that if we're still tied and bound into that overly self-centered, non-empathetic space, we'll look at that and it'll reflect back to us, and we'll go, God, I'm just horrible. Right? I'm never going to be any good. Look at this person. They're able to do this, and I can't even basically put 2 feet in front of each other and walk normally. That's unhelpful too. That's unhealthy. It's really acknowledging that there's just unique value and coolness in everybody.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
That's a great point. And that's I did this thing for the second time. What is it? The Strengths Finder.
The
Strengths Finder.
Yeah.
And a couple of my traits are individualistic, and that was the same one I had about 10 years ago. And I find it interesting that it continues to pop up. But, when I look at everybody, I always think to myself, when I don't understand something, there's a story and something that I don't know that is a bridge to a misunderstanding about that person, whether I don't like them or I don't like the way that they come off. It could be that they're just somebody who's been hurt too many times and they don't like to open up, or they don't like to talk. And just trying to think about everybody in their own terms, because they all, if they're 20 plus or however many years old, doesn't really matter. They've all been through things through a certain age in their life, and it's hard for me to not have compassion about somebody's story and call somebody lazy. And that's just the cheap way to not have to emotionally invest in somebody's history and understand their situation. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're right, but just understanding it is always a lot better. So no, I love treating people like individuals. 'Cause that's a hard thing with your kids too, because I think that's the first realization with kids for me, that people are like really different, and not just because they're raised a certain way. I think it used to be more of an environment thing, but now I'm like, nah, these genetics, they're a real deal. Like my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old came from the same 2 people, but they are not the same people.
Yeah,
they are not the same. One is motivated by things, and the other one could give 2 shits about a present, a gift.
Yeah.
And we've been trying this reward for this potty training for a 4-year-old, and he's like, nah, I'm not, and he's not interested. And I don't know his pleasure button. I can't find it.
Yeah.
But the other one's like, you buy me some tokens for Minecraft? Like, and that,
then I'm in.
Yeah, I can motivate him to do homework, read books. But the other, it's just such a weird thing that you're just like, I on the kid that I don't really need to push too hard, I don't know what his buttons are.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's what is the name of the book? It's been around forever. The gifts. Each person has that hot button that you're talking about. So it's for some people it's physical gifts, right? Or it's attention. I think there's 5 or 7 of them. I really should remember the name of this book. And
you're not talking about love languages, are you?
Yeah, love languages.
Okay,
yeah. And there's a tremendous amount of truth and knowledge in that simple construct. So I can tell you again, from a career standpoint, the writer was a genius. The writer provided a framework, and the problems with frameworks sometimes is that they're high enough level that everything seems like it's a revelation because everything easily fits into it, right? You just go, oh yeah, well, my it's words of encouragement, for and it really was for my youngest son. He was a big words of encouragement kid. The problem is that so yeah, I get you, the genetics. The problem with like these frameworks is that people just like buy into them lock, stock, and barrel and go, oh, that's my child, or oh, that's my spouse, right? And so with my youngest, and he wouldn't mind me sharing this because he's really a cool kid, and he's really proud of the fact that he's worked through. But my youngest at 9 years old was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Okay. And so yes, gifts were his love language, but communicating with a child with Asperger's is a different beast altogether. Like there just was a whole lot more in terms of layers and things that you needed to work through, and so I guess that's the way they say that books like The Love Languages are helpful in getting us oriented towards, okay, that kid really just likes physical touch and just wants me to give him a big hug. But I think too many people in culture today look at these things like, those types of things, or whatever else the newest publication of the day is, and it's like an easy bake oven.
Yeah.
Life doesn't work that way. Like, life is complex and confusing and messy, and just when you think that I had this kid figured out, like, all of a sudden they just switch gears, and the next thing you know, they're all dressed in all black and got eyeliner on, and and they're thinking that Marilyn Manson is the coolest thing that they've ever heard, and you're like, no, it wasn't cool when I was listening to it like 20 years ago. But you run the risk of oversimplifying to find an answer.
Yeah, for a complex individual. You try to simplify it down to a 5-step process of a book.
Yeah, you're like, hey, no. The book says you're supposed to be doing this right now.
Yeah, you're only number 4, and that's gifts. I gave you all the gifts. What's the problem? No, it's totally true. I think another gift of being a parent is looking at everybody else as a child.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And really being able to. I was telling somebody that at our gym the other day who was younger. And I was like, you know what? I can see everybody at 20, what they will likely either be like, or what their stumblings will probably be at 40.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I'm at this middle point in life where I'm like, okay, I've seen some things, and I know where people, I don't want to say go wrong, but they just have struggles with. And they're just amplified as they go along. It's almost like, James Clear.
Yeah.
The guy,
yeah.
And I ordered his book, and I'm so excited because it just so makes sense that, like, these little things, just you keep putting them in the bucket.
Yeah. Yeah.
And eventually it's the hockey stick. You start to take off. Maybe that's you in your life and your career.
No.
You just add to these little things, little by little, but.
Yeah, I'm excited to read James's book as well, and for a couple of different reasons. First of all, I'm super jealous because I probably have at least 5 books that have been in the dock, for the last 15 years. It's really fascinating how difficult it is to actually write a book. And I'm surrounded by a number of people that have done them. James and Aaron Giannetti over in Endeavor has written a defense book, and it's a long, laborious process to do them. So you kind of like get started and you go, oh yeah, I got like 25,000 words in the in the bank, and then the next thing you go is like, oh man, I haven't touched it for like 6 months. So it's cool, to see somebody actually get through that. But what I'm really interested in reading relative to the way that he's framing behaviors and patterns, which I believe is absolutely 100% accurate, is that one of the things that I've been working on recently in terms of a book is based on the application of intensity. I think that there's a misunderstanding relative to how change occurs, and this is really one of those things that's developed over the last 15 or 20 years for me. I used to do a lot of speaking on technology change, and one of the things that I landed on is that there is no substantial or significant change to a curve. So a pattern, I always use the old Gaussian bell curve, the big hump. Yeah, and you can't change that sample. Statistical analysis, you can't change that sample without introducing a catastrophic event. So things like our habits, which are really just manifestations of patterns, can't change without there being something catastrophic. And the real big realization for this for me is most of the community that I've been involved with for the last several years knows this. I lost my late wife to terminal cancer, and I can tell you that your observation about, if I see somebody at 20, I know what they're going to look like at 40, is really spot on for the broad statistical distribution of everybody over the course of their lives.
Sure.
The ones that are different and I would put myself in that category. There are people that, I just went to an all 80s class reunion back, where I grew up in this little town. There are people that are like, there's no way we thought you were going to be like this now, right? And not in a bad way, by the way. It was just, we didn't expect that this would be the path that you would take. And it's because all of those patterns for me were obliterated, going through this process of 15 months of managing my late wife's cancer treatments and, being with somebody for 20 plus years and then, realizing together, that was a really difficult, I remember that day, the day that my late wife said, hey, I'm just not going to make it. Right. And up until that point, everything was about, we're going to be the first. We're going to get through this. We're going to find something, that's new. We're going to get through this genetic clinical trial, and it's going to work. And then I just remember that day. I just remember that day when she said, I'm not going to make it.
That's tough.
And she was like, and here's what you need to do. And I think that in a laundry list of things that we talked about over the course of that next couple of weeks, I think almost every single one of them I said, no, I can't do that. Like, that's not me. Like, I can't make those changes. And she said, you have to. And I was like, why? And she goes, because it's not us anymore, right? And you're not going to find us again. It's going to be different whether you want it to be or not. And if you're still the same and everything else is different, you're going to fail. Yeah. And I was like, wow, like there's just an unmutable, unchangeable reality, factual reality to that. Then now, a couple years on, where I've met widowers and widows who were in my age, it's fascinating to see the ones that haven't been able to change because you have to, because of this catastrophic event. And it's not just, that example, right? Think about the example of your manager. Everything went a specific way, and choices and decisions and patterns went a specific way until that day. Yep. Right? Until that day when I had an accident and things changed, and I could either remain the same or I have to change because of the catastrophic event. So I'm really interested in James's book to see how my understanding about patterns and behaviors kind of lines up with the way that he's put them together.
It's very unique because in talking about your wife, and there's two things that you said that stuck to me because it's kind of a contradiction of everyone is unique, but everyone's the same, right? Yeah. So it's so interesting because in that moment, it's like, I'm going to be unique and we're going to beat this to we're not. Yeah. But here's what you have to do to be yourself, but just kind of like everyone else. Yeah. If you're going to make it. Yeah. Yeah. So
I think that, it's just a truth. I wouldn't wish what we went through, certainly what she went through, which was way more than I had to, on anybody. But the tough thing for people to grasp since I came through it was how quickly I changed everything in my life. And there was this big gap in understanding among a number of people around me who just were like, oh, well, you're grieving and you're making lots of bad choices and you should slow down. And this is tough for people to hear, but it's easy for me to say now. I used to not be able to talk about the subject at all without breaking down, but it's tough for people to hear. But I'm like, I watched a healthy 167-pound woman who was a beast of an athlete, was a scholarship athlete in college and a great mom and a fantastic sister to her family. And I watched her in the course of 15 months go to 82 pounds to, deal with things like you were talking about, those things that we don't like to even think about, deal with the medical issues. And I just watched her leave. And I think that it's hard for people to grasp that there are two types of folks in those experiences. There are the folks that just shut down, and I have no making no judgment of folks that take that route because that's what they need to do.
Yeah.
And then there are other folks that are like, I just watched like literally the most important person in my life die. So I probably more than anybody else know how little time is left. And it's this, is again, that contradiction, right? I'm living like there's no tomorrow, but I'm planning like I'm going to die at 115.
Yeah.
Right. And there's just value in that because I never feel unfulfilled on a day-to-day basis. I think, did I live today? And I really legitimately think that way every day. And I hope I do for the rest of my life because I don't think that there's margin for wasted time. And if people are okay with wasted time, I think, frankly, they rethink that decision when they're at the end.
Yeah.
And think about, oh, here's what I should have done or where I could have gone or what I could have done, as opposed to just do it. Like, don't let the challenge of dealing with losing keep you from experiencing.
Yeah. No, there's so many things that are passing through my head just thinking about that. And I talk to people about this, about doing the podcast in general. It's like, I have no delusions of grandeur that I'm going to get 100 million, listeners, and I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to do all this stuff. I do it because, number one, I like talking to people, and I also think that we don't do this enough. Not you and I, but
right.
Just people in general. We're so comment and text and this and that based that it's a great way for me to sit and also memorialize a conversation where we couldn't do that we do that with photos forever.
Right.
But now because I lost my dad when I was about 6 years old, and I always think, man, wouldn't it be nice, even if I didn't think things were perfect, I would love to hear the thought process or, a take on a topic or what did you chat about with your friends with, or those kind of things. I just think that those are important things that we have the technology. Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, the next step is video if that's ever something I want to do, but no, I have fun with it. But back to your point, there was a conversation around people that we both know that someone had second guessed you just in a conversation. And I was thinking to myself, I don't remember if I told them this or not, but I was thinking in my head, they didn't really know what was your relationship with your late wife or any of the conversations that had been had or, it's not up for anybody else to judge how to grieve.
Yeah.
I was just reading something. I'm going to pull this up on Twitter because I was just glancing at it. It was Brene Brown, and it was from this lady from a TED Talk, Liz Gilbert. It says, it's an honor to be in grief. It's an honor to feel that much, to have loved that much. And I'm like, man, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's been fascinating to go through the process because there's so many different threads that people don't understand. The fascinating thing about my journey with Valerie was she was not a very really public person. So I will never forget the day that we got the definitive diagnosis, and of course we're shattered, and we actually didn't tell anybody because it was one of our kids' birthdays, and we didn't want to make that the day, right? And so we didn't say anything, and we went to bed, and we're shattered, and the next morning I get up, and she's already posted on Facebook. Like, it's like 6:00 in the morning. She hasn't been able to sleep all night, obviously, and she posts on Facebook, and I'm like, oh my God, I have got to figure out how to get this. No, so my personality is that, and this is a personality characteristic that won't change. I've always been a fixer, so I'm like, I gotta fix this, right? And then we really, we created separate Facebook pages and social media outlets, and we shared every bit of the story and the journey.
Yeah.
And all the ups and downs and the frustrations, and I still, to this day, I keep the Facebook pages out there. I still get people that send me emails saying, hey, my husband's got stage 4, cholangiocarcinoma or pancreatic cancer, or I have it, can you help me? And I think that's more difficult than anything else because, it goes back to, we weren't unique. I get a email from somebody going, I'm desperate and the doctors say nothing can save me, and what can you do to help me? Oof. And I still get them, and I probably will for years. And the fascinating piece of these threads of grief is that I spent 15 months and, like, to everybody in the world, I was this superhero. I was holding up the family and pushing people forward and coordinating and all this crazy stuff, and really I was just trying to hold on. I mean, legit, no lie, I've shared this publicly with a number of people. I 7 o'clock every morning I was sitting on my front porch with bourbon and a coffee cup, and because it was hard.
Yeah.
And then Valerie passed away, and then we went through that transition period of immediate, like, white hot grief, and Val and I had laid out all of our plans together, and I had marching orders. And then, I've definitely gone further from that plan than what we initially put together. But I knew what I needed to do because we put it out there, and it was so foreign to people that a couple things happened. For some people, I went from superhero to supervillain within, 0.0 seconds. It was just like instantaneous. Like, how could you, or why would you, or why would you sell the house, or why would you do? And I'm like, because these were the discussions and the plans that we made. So you realize that in that type of a scenario, you don't get to be like my grandparents, where my grandfather went down and sat on the curb and passed away when he was taking out the trash at 93 years old. And then my grandmother at 93 years old was like, I don't know what I'm going to do without Bill. Yeah. And 18 months later, she didn't have to worry about it because she was with him together again. Yeah. Right? I didn't get that.
Sure.
Like, it's like, you're not even at halfway point of your life, dude. And now you're faced with this situation, and it's such a small club, that people have no concept of what it's actually like. And I was really, really fortunate. Fortunate is so weird. My little sister actually lost her first husband in a car accident when she was in her 20s. So she was helping me kind of, replay through, you're going to experience this, but it's going to be weirder because it's like 20 years later. And people just don't know, but man, do they assume. They make assumptions all day long about, oh, well, and I was real salty about it for probably about the first year. And then after that, there was this recognition that, that person that may have been dialoguing with you about their perceptions or their observations.
Yeah.
I never heard about them.
Yep.
They went on with their daily lives.
Yep.
They didn't pay my bills. They're not paying for my taxes. They don't have any daily interaction with me of any kind of meaningful, connection. So why would I be irritated about it? Yeah. Right? There'll be points when people reach their own revelation, their own catastrophic moment. And I think that that's the hardest thing for people to hear as I share kind of details about this stuff is like, I'm not unique. You are going to go through a catastrophic, heartbreaking, torturous point in your life when somebody that you truly, deeply, madly care about passes away. Yeah. It's just going to happen. And I think that's why people are real judgy about it, because they don't see themselves being able to get through it. And I tell people all the time, you'll get through it. You will. You have no choice. And and when it happens, you'll say, I'm never going to make it. And then a year and a half later or 5 years later, you're going to get through the other end of that pipeline. You're going to go, I made it. Right. And it's just so consistent in the human experience.
Oh, no, 100%. Yeah. Not to say that you're not unique.
No. Yeah.
No pun intended. But no, there's I don't know. You watch NFL football at all?
Some, yeah.
There's Tyrone Matthew, who's the honey beaver, whatever, and he got arrested and kicked out of school and all this stuff, and then his best friend died, and there was this post, and he's he's just talking. There was a quote where he never thought that he would be in the position that he's in.
Yeah.
You know, and it's, especially with those kids, I think about that for everybody. And I think that's part of being kind of an individualistic person when you consider everybody else's situation. Number one, understand you don't understand.
Yeah.
You know, and you have no idea what they're going through. And just like thinking in that manner, I think opens you up to go, you know, listen to their story. You know, maybe you'll change your perception a little bit.
Yeah, or focus on outcomes. I think is another piece that's really, really important, because what I find fascinating is when anybody, because people don't talk to you, by the way. It's literally like you have the Black Plague.
I believe it.
Yeah. So nobody talks to you. They talk around you a lot.
Yeah.
And the people that did or have talked to me, the very first thing that I say is, you know, you need to focus on outcomes. And the expected outcome that Valerie had for me in my life and for our children and for my children from my first marriage is to be happy.
Yeah.
And I am enormously happy. I'm like, this goes back to the changing of habits. I took this opportunity to change things about myself that I found unpleasant.
Yeah.
You know, that, to be honest, the characteristics of talking over people, you know, when we're talking about, you know, the life experiences, and now I see the experiences that I have as an opportunity to share and maybe help somebody, not to have a contest. But boy, did I used to do that. I mean, I was obnoxious, and I think if the single outcome that was her greatest desire is met, if you have a problem with the methods and the means, like, zip it, like, because the methods and the means
don't take part in them, right?
Yeah, I'm like like, if you don't think it's healthy for me to have worked out as much as I have over the last couple of years, I'll tell you that the working out that I've done at the level and intensity that I've done it has kept that bourbon out of that coffee cup, you know, for a couple of years.
Yeah. You
know, at 7:00 in the morning. I mean, that was a method and a means that you might be like, hey, you know, you're taking this to an extreme, but I'm like, the net outcome is the happiness that was expected.
Yeah.
And and it's interesting that people have a lot of opinions about stuff that, again, is selfishly oriented towards
Well, I think
themselves.
some of it's maybe privilege based in terms of maybe they haven't had, it's a contradiction, the benefit of a troubling time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and because the more people I meet and see that have overcome seemingly tragic situations, the more I'm kind of magnetically trying to cling to them. Because I've told it to one of my friends once. I said, you know, I see people as two different people. I see broken people and I see people that aren't broken. Maybe not yet, but those people don't interest me.
Yeah.
I not to say that they're not interesting. Maybe I don't know their story, but sometimes I'm like, these are really good people, and I don't know what kind of tragedies they've been through.
What do they say about blues music? No blues musician is any good if they haven't had multiple relationships and have scars and bruises and some age, right? And there's truth in it. I think it's funny because I remember when I got out of the Army, people tend to forget that there have been multiple economic recessions in the United States over history, and so
really?
when I got out of the Army, we were smack in the middle of one in the early '90s, and I remember I sent out, I'll never forget the number, 147 resumes, and I didn't get one interview.
Wow.
And I mean, I'm like, hey, I graduated from Ohio State. I'm a military vet. Everybody should love me, and nobody. Like, it was demoralizing.
What year was this?
92.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and 92-ish, 93-ish. Got to be somewhere in there.
Okay.
And I ended up selling cars.
Ooh,
and
that's a good experience, though.
Oh God, it was a real character builder.
How people see you, how you see or are supposed to see people.
Yeah, and this reality of these experiences, like you said, it was frustrating to me because I'm applying for positions and I'm like, you should just hire me because I did really well in college and I'm a, vet and I'm really good. And they're like, well, you need like 7 years experience. And I think this is a funny reality of people in their 20s. And this is regardless of generation. We go,
Oh no, 100%.
We go experience. Like who needs experience? Like, and now I look at what I do and I think, would I want one of those young me's on my team for what I do for a living now? I mean, like, oh Lord, no. Like that just is like, I wouldn't even bet on potential at that point. And the value of experience is critical. So not just in that professional space, but certainly in the personal space. So that's where I come back and just couldn't agree with you more. When people have something to say to me about it, if they're bold enough to say it to me, I'm like, you really have no idea. You haven't. Well, I lost an aunt. I lost an uncle. Right. I think that I think it's just flat out devastating for any human being to lose a spouse, a significant other, a partner, or a child. Oh. And I think that those two events are so difficult for people to wrap their heads around that it just puts people in a position where they're looking at you and they feel like they have to say something, and about 90% of the time, what they say is wrong. Yeah, it's just the wrong thing. Yeah, and it ends up kind of being funny after a while. But for me, it's I take a look at what the last couple of years have been like, and I'm just astounded. I mean, I have Marie's in my life, and she's willing and able to manage and cope with all of this. I mean, think about what all comes along with those experiences and having to deal with that. And my kids have been outstanding, just phenomenal. And I look at it and I go, these are the people that matter. And then of course my circle of friends that really have been there and supported me, they're the folks that really matter. And I had said it probably about in the third month after Val passed away. Eventually, somebody will experience their own catastrophe, or eventually, people will wonder what they're having for dinner tonight, or eventually, people are going to get concerned about what movie they're going to go see, and the event and all of the emotion and everything gets more and more distant. It never goes away. Sure. It just gets more and more distant, to the point where people go, oh man, I can't believe it's been 3 years since, or I can't believe it's been 4 years since, or I can't believe it's been 10 years since, because we all have lives. We all got stuff to do.
No doubt. I don't know. I probably haven't told it a lot, but I took care of my great aunt for a little while, and she'd been in and out of hospice twice, and she was basically like my grandmother. I'd always go to her house. She'd watch us, but they were two little Catholic sisters that lived together. She was born in 1918. Her sister passed away, and then she fell down, broke a hip, and the story happens. It's pretty common. It's not unique. But she's it was the third time in hospice, and the director from the nursing home had called me, and she's like, I think this is the time you need to come. And this is in Springfield, and I'm in Newark, Ohio. Yeah. And I'm like, shit. But to go there and to hold somebody's hand as they take their last breath, even though she's 90 years old, I mean, it was just, it was powerful. Yeah. Because it's nothing like you expect it would be. Yeah, no. Whether it's just not. And there's moments that are like later down the road when I'm just at work and I'm doing one thing, and then like a memory or something pops in my brain. I'm like, man, I really miss having them in my life. So that's the only closest thing I did. But just experience. Yeah, that's kind of like, the grief never goes away, but you realize that you gotta move on or do something to get over it. I don't know. Yeah. No, it's just life happens. I mean, it just keeps moving. I mean, this is not it's not a still picture, right? And I think that I'm thankful for the time that's passed since, because I'm trying to build a life with somebody who I
absolutely love, and I'm trying to, keep moving my children along, and that takes a lot of work. And
Oh, man.
like, honestly, if you're not in it with me, like, piss off. Like, I got stuff to do. It's not that I don't like it. It's that, if you don't have a task on my list, we can go get a beer later. But for right now, there's stuff that needs to get done.
That's apparent. I think that's, for me, becoming a parent where it's just it's the point where I realize I'm like, man, I don't have time for bullshit. I just got to go.
Yeah.
We got this thing to do. You going to help me? You want to come? What's going on? But, I don't have time for pettiness, or I got to move on. So you do a lot in cybersecurity.
Yeah.
What, I think that so much of it it's so super important, but at the same time, I don't know a lot about it. But I know it's important. Especially with companies and them safeguarding records and having so much issues. What's kind of like the big thing in the world today? I mean, companies spend a lot of money on this kind of stuff.
Yeah. It's a fascinating business to be in for me, because so much of it to me is common sense. So I make tons of pop culture references. So it's fascinating to me. I tell people all the time, I'm like, if you watch and rewatch The Matrix and the Matrix series multiple times, you'll learn more about cybersecurity than you'd ever possibly imagine. You just need to pay attention. And it's because the movie does an excellent job of enforcing the truth about what cybersecurity is. I mentioned early on about, the analog and the digital realities. People are like, this cybersecurity stuff is so complicated. I'm like, really? I'm like, do you leave your garage unlocked at night? No, I wouldn't leave my garage unlocked at night. Really? So do you walk down the street and say, hey, I just got some money and it was, part of a settlement and I'd like somebody to come take it? No. Oh, okay. So if somebody shows up at your house and says, hey, I heard you had a lot of money and I'd like you to buy some aluminum siding and I'd like you to sign a contract and pay me up front, would you pay them? No. Like, so why do you do all that stuff in the digital world? Like, you leave stuff unlocked.
Yeah.
You click on offers that obviously, you never, are walking in the middle of a field and go, oh, look, a building that's offering 15% off of Ray-Ban sunglasses. Let me go in there. But we do the digital equivalent all the time. And it's because the digital realm is so disintermediated from like the physical, tangible world that we forget to make those connections. So, like the key maker in the Matrix, he's got the keys to all the doors. Those are cryptographic keys and encryption that are used, to lock up, the most highly valuable things in the digital realm. And functionally, they're no different. And yet, we've lost the capability to make those leaps of logic and understanding into the digital realm for a number of different reasons. Some of it's just advertising. Like, technology is mystical. Like, it's something that's complicated because people have to go to school and get a degree in programming. And I'm like, really? I'm like, I got a degree in political science with a certified minor in Japanese language. Like, and one of the best guys that I know in cybersecurity than me, not bragging, other than me is he's almost got a PhD in literature. It has nothing to do with the technical capabilities to be able to understand the cybersecurity world. I spent a lot of years, like all the way. So my technology career started in the middle '90s by accident. Stumbled into it. Actually happened because of a Christmas party. So there was booze, and somebody said, "Hey, if you can do the kind of work that you've been doing, I think you can come work in technology." And I was like, "Sweet." Like, I had no idea what I was doing.
Yeah.
But I showed up just because it was interpersonal. The guy was like, and he's still a fantastic guy. He's a mentor, and going through this process of technology, I was always fascinated by how much effort by technologists was made to make things seem so mysterious,
complex.
Like you can't possibly understand this.
Yeah,
and I'd be like, well, doesn't this connect to that and this do that? And I'd be like, oh yeah, you figured it out. And cybersecurity is is an interesting field simply because most of the problems that we currently experience today are in reality created by the fact that basic security principles didn't exist in certainly the very advent of technology. But as we come through the 90s and get into where people have, I mean, I remember when I got my first desktop. Like, it was a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
A real desktop. Like, I played with a TRS-80 from Radio Shack in my uncle's house, in the 70s, but not a, I'm doing my word processing, I'm doing my spreadsheets, I'm doing my home finances.
Dude, you're getting a Dell?
Yeah. I had a, no, what was the
Gateway? IBM? Oh,
I had a Gateway. That was my first computer because I could get it on payment plans. and as we go through that time period, all the way through the blitz around the Y2K event and everything, none of the technology that we used at that time, which is foundational and the basis for the technology that we use today, was built with any security in mind, because it wasn't a problem. It really wasn't. It was not top of mind. So what happens is if you build tons and tons of applications, or you build tons and tons of processes, or build tons and tons of approaches and methodologies to solving technical solutions in a way that was never bound by security, you go 20 or 25 years on, and everything in technology is an evolution of the previous stage. Now everything that you're currently building also isn't built with security in mind.
Yeah.
One of the most fascinating things for me that I do with companies is that it still to this day, if you have a development organization servicing a business and a company, the developers, they don't code with any security in mind. Matter of fact, the cybersecurity guys come behind with code scanning, and then point out all the stuff that's wrong in it. And the basic programmer is not pursuing a path to make sure that it's secure. I'm not making a value judgment about that, right? Because a programmer aligned to a business project has a responsibility to meet the business requirements.
Yes.
But now we kind of go back up to the top where companies aren't putting mandatory security requirements in the business requirements for the applications that are being built. And then all of a sudden people are like, well, how does Equifax happen? Because they built it that way.
Yeah.
And you go, well, shouldn't they have been caring about security? Well, yeah, absolutely they should have been, but they didn't. And this is how those things happen. So we always laugh in cybersecurity. It's a target-rich environment. Like, this will be the remainder of my career because there's so much work to do that there's not enough of us. I mean, it's going to be like, it was a figure for 2020, 1.75 million employee shortage in cybersecurity trades just in the United States. And it's just a great field to be in, but it's not as... it's not sexy. I'm just going to say that right
Is
now.
there ever any way that you can eliminate the need for cybersecurity?
No.
I mean, because I'm trying to think to myself, just in my head right now, okay, could you ever eliminate the need for police?
No, because humans suck.
Yeah.
That's it. No,
and if you're saying the analog is the digital,
yeah,
because ultimately humans are going to suck in some way.
Yeah, no, it's just impossible. It's just, the problem is that it's a reality of the need for this on a continuous and ongoing basis when we never worried about it before. And then people go, wow, it's really complex and really, really? Like, how complex and how costly would it be to add not just rekey, but add locks and add, control measures and security systems to the Empire State Building, like, all at once?
Yeah.
Like, it's going to cost a ton of money if you never did it. Like, it's going to cost a ton of money. It's going to be really inconvenient. The big thing is the inconvenience part is interesting to me. The big thing is that the real change in terms of a more secure world will happen when human beings are willing to be inconvenienced by security measures. And this is not the case today. The businesses themselves go, oh, we can't make it harder for our customers, right? Well, if you don't make it harder for the customers, you make it easier for the bad guys. It's just a reality. And so ease of use is like the direct enemy of security.
Yeah, they have opposite intentions in mind.
Yeah.
It's that whole two-factor authentication where I'm like, I don't want to really secure my Gmail account.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But in the end, I'm like, oh, that was super easy. All they want to do is text me.
Yeah. And it's frustrating because it's like, it is a lack of acknowledgement of the realities of human behavior. So just like we said, like, you can't ever get rid of security because human beings suck. You can't ever have security without inconveniencing people. now you can make it cooler, slicker, faster, right? Just
Sure.
like just like my garage, right? I don't get into my garage. Matter of fact, my garage doors on my garage that I built don't have any handles on the outside, right? None. So I couldn't even put a key in there to unlock it if I wanted to. So I've got, my garage door openers, and that's my entry point, and it's convenient because I just push a button. Is it still a riskier solution than a hard lock or a deadbolt or a bar lock? Or because now there's the opportunity for it to get breached through other means than somebody just kicking in a door.
Sure.
They got the right electronic gizmos, they can get in. But now we're getting into the risk realities of security. How much risk am I willing to take on?
Yeah.
Right.
That's like investments 101 from me being a finance major. It's like, hey, listen, risk equals reward. So you may not spend that much money.
Yep.
And you have the opportunity for huge gains by not spending this money, but you also have to hedge against the bad.
Yeah.
And if you're not willing to do that, you risk losing.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny that you bring up the financial aspect of it, because when I actually started, there was this brief period in my career where there was this thing called the internet bubble, because nothing's ever repeated or anything's new, but there was like this big internet bubble, and I was working for a startup company that was funded by a venture capital firm, and we went bust. Like the company was like done. Like people were like taking office furniture with them, kind of thing. Yeah, it collapsed, and but the venture capital firm was also a firm that had invested in a technology that nobody could get any resources for. And I was certified in it as a result of working for that company. So I went to work for one of the big four, big five firms. And another important lesson could be a whole other conversation. What's it like to be, the EY, Deloitte, PricewaterhouseCoopers folks, and just briefly, I can tell you the experience was I showed up for work one day, and the very first day, and my boss gave me 2 books on derivatives and risk management and financial markets.
Oh my.
Yeah. Trading risk specifically. And they were big books. I still have one of them. And he said, you've got the remainder of this week and the weekend to read these, and you will be the client on Monday, and you will be an expert.
Oh my.
And I did, and I ended up spending a couple of years developing and building financial trading system platforms, derivatives, all financial stuff. So,
yeah.
But oil and gas and coal and uranium and all this kind of crazy stuff. We could have like this crazy conversation about all the jobs that I've had in my life, because I have more jobs than a Jamaican, and we could this was pretty cool, from the standpoint that on top of all that, my big client, when you talk about experiences, my big client that I was standing on the last day was Enron.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And
the lights go out?
No,
I'm just kidding.
No, somebody's trying to steal the Big E, though. I do remember that. That was funny. Somebody was out there with a crowbar. But because my understanding of risk was based in the traditional notions of risk in these financial trading activities, and understanding the difference between correlation and contango and like all of these really specific financial risk management terms, they all apply incredibly well into the cybersecurity world relative to understanding how risk drives solutions and then also mitigates behaviors.
Yeah.
So, I go back to what we talked about at the top of the conversation. I've just gotten everywhere that I've ever gotten, to this point by accident. I just tripped and stumbled. But the big thing that I tell people is that, there's a couple of things I tell my children all the time. A lesson I learned from my own father. His saying was, I don't care if you're a garbage man, just be happy. I modified that to let your work make a way for you. So I tell my kids all the time, whatever job you're doing, man, just be outstanding at it. Don't worry about being the best, because you're setting yourself up to compete with somebody. Be outstanding at it. Be exceptional at what you're being asked to do. And everything else will follow after that. And the other thing that I tell, my kids relative to career guidance is keep your ears and your eyes open constantly.
Yeah.
Always be listening, observing, watching, because what's going on around you is what is going to feed in your capabilities to be successful at what you're doing. Either it's going to be stuff that you recognize as stuff I shouldn't be doing.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right? Or it's stuff that you go, I need to model that, right?
Yeah.
What that person's doing is something that I need to incorporate into my own work personality.
Yeah. There's Tim Ferriss had this lady on, I forget her name, but she was some venture capitalist person who I think we got into it because of math, but she talked about her experiences with her father, and he would ask her, did you do an outstanding job or something to that? Like, did you strive for excellence in some way? And no matter what was done, that was always the question. So she continuously repeats this to herself later on in life. And I think, did you do it in a world-class fashion? Yeah. And I'm like, world-class, wow, that's next level stuff. Yeah. I always use sports comparisons because, people watch sports. I like a lot of basketball because I enjoy watching somebody like LeBron James play basketball. Mm-hmm. And people watch, and you can hear them banter back and forth on the sports shows in the mornings or whatever. But that's never really the story. That's just the reaction to the show. Yeah. That's not the behind the scenes work. That's not waking up at 6 a.m. to get a massage, to go practice in the gym, to go lift weights, to take a nap, to go back and get ready for a game. But you think about, there's so much work that's going on before the actual show is done. And I just think about that in terms of my work product, in every little mundane step that I think is completely wasteful. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I should skip it. Right. I don't know. I just try to find parallels between that, and I start thinking to myself, did you do a world-class job on everything that you do? But like you said, keep your ears open for sure. First couple companies I worked for, they didn't go belly up per se, but I saw things change. And I remember what the feelings were like. And when I felt them at the third place I worked for, I was like, this is a feeling I felt before. Mm-hmm. I know what's going on here. Yep. And it's a much larger organization, so I think that maybe in just that little tributary is kind of drying up. It may not be the entire organization, but I'm like, I know the sentiment here, and I know when things aren't the way they are. So yeah. But now that's very interesting. So trying to relate that analog to digital. So you're just trying to keep it simple and let people know that it's not unique. Yeah, well, that's actually what has kind of become my hallmark for the national speaking that I've been doing, which has been crazy. The last 2 years, I think I've spoken 30 or 35 times, and I've been, and I've learned. So I always wanted to do that. Yeah, I always wanted to. It wasn't even so much wanting to be a public speaker. It was. Because it's weird. Like it takes a lot of energy to put yourself out there, and then it's almost like I have a huge amount of respect for stand-up comedians. Because I think that it takes a lot of effort to go out and keep people engaged. Mm-hmm. And then there's a certain part of my speaking style where I want people to be amused, not because I want to be funny, but because I need to have audiences registering with me that they're listening. Yes. And that's the real kind of litmus test. But the crazy thing for me is that I really go after breaking down complex, not just cybersecurity, but complex life and technology issues and career guidance and all of that. I try and break it down into simple stories. And it's really cool because that is a learned behavior. That was my dad. That was my old man. He in the 70s he got tired of being a sales guy and having his his territories cut and his commissions cut, and
young guy, he said, I'm done. I'm going to be a fishing captain on Lake Erie. And I went to work for him when I was 13 years old. And every day I would get on the boat, and we ran, typical guide service on the lake. So my dad would have 6 guys, and then later he got a bigger boat and he had 12 guys, and then he had 11 boats in his fleet. And he just he's a brilliant sales guy, still to this day. And I would get on that boat, and I remember from about 13 or 14 years old, people always complain to me that I sometimes tell them the same stories over and over again. That is learned as well. I mean, I was on that boat, and by the time I was 15, I was like, oh, God, Dad's going to tell that story again. But there was the reality in my father's storytelling, and it's the same thing to this day. The necessity of human beings to make a point of personal connection in order for there to be a transport of information between us. There needs to be a connection, right? We will be typically skeptical and cynical and pig-headed and prejudiced and biased to our own interests until you go, oh man, like, Bob?
Yeah.
Like, I know Bob's like crazy. Like, let me tell you some Bob stories, right? Now all of a sudden, boom, we've got this personal connection. And my father taught me that for years and years and years. And it was really weird. It came to be useful in terms of managing other human beings. And over the course of my career, I've had, hundreds, if not thousands of direct reports and managers and supervisors and all that work for me. But now when it comes to speaking, it creates this opportunity where I can teach people by making the personal connections. And I'll share one just briefly that I've used so many times over the last couple of years, because it registers. So to help people understand this concept of the building block of security, which is a control category that makes perfect sense to people. It's identity, right? Everything that you do, phone, computer, kiosk, everything that you do is dependent upon a confirmation that you are who you say you are. That is the fundamental building block of security. It's the same in the analog. Like, you can't walk into the office building downtown, without a badge and do a swipe.
Yep.
And if it doesn't ring, not showing it to the guy, and can I see your driver's license? It's the same exact thing in the digital world. And, but that particular control component within cybersecurity is grossly underfunded in almost every company on the planet. So everybody that's supposed to be protecting your stuff does a really bad job of confirming that you are who you say you are. Like, universally. Like, this is the biggest problem.
I think about my badge, and it's just RFID, beep.
Yep.
How do they know that that's me? They don't.
Yeah.
It's just the guy that has that badge.
Yeah. So when I get up and speak on the subject, one of the things that I pull up is this picture of this. I tend to use a lot of, like, pop culture references and really odd pictures. And the picture is like this creepy dude in a trench coat with a cigarette in his mouth looking out over a playground with kids, like, on a merry-go-round.
Yeah.
Like, you can feel like people cringe when I put the picture up. And I'm like, okay, look, like, I have the blessing of a diverse life. I said, so I'm an elected official. And, let me back this up. First, I say the real problem with cybersecurity today is there's not enough emotional investment in terms of people being invested to keep bad things from happening. And I said, the example that I'll give you is I'm on a school board, and I have 15,000 students, and I have 1,100 teachers and 1,400 administration staff and, janitors and coaches and everything, and great bus drivers. Love my bus drivers in Westerville. And that's my universe when it comes to kids. And then I ask the audience, who has kids K through 12 in the room? It's usually anywhere from 30 to 60% of the room. Hands go up. I go, cool. So now I want you to take all this school reference point, and I want you to go through this thought experiment with me. And I said, so you love your kids' school. You love everything about your kids' school. You love the fact that they have great programs. You love the teachers. You love the principals. You love the lunch servers. You like the crossing guard. Just everything about the school you love. And one day you get a phone call, and it's one of those robocalls, goes right to your voicemail on your cell phone. You pick it up after a meeting, and it says, "Hi, this is so and so, the administrative assistant for your kid's school, and we have somebody in the building and we don't know who they are. We don't know how they got here, and we don't know what their interests are. We don't know where they are. We don't know why they're here. We don't know what time they arrive. We don't know if they plan on leaving, but everything's cool. That's the reaction, kind of universally in every presentation I've made in the last couple of years. That reaction that you just had is what almost everybody does. And then I ask, hey, show of hands, who actually physically felt something like twinge inside of them where they were like, that just is not cool.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, that's the way that it is in companies today. Today, there's somebody inside of that system that you don't know. You don't know why they're there. You don't know what they're doing. You don't know what their intentions are. And then I ask, is your reaction the same? Like, what would your reaction be in that school setting? You're picking up the phone. You're texting your kid. You're driving to the school. You're like, there is something there that is an unknown. Not even something that doesn't, isn't supposed to be there because you don't know that. There's an unknown, and that's a threat.
Yeah.
Right. And when I share those types of things, it's funny you mentioned world class because I had this really humbling moment. Because I tend to be, one of the other things that I've learned in speaking, particularly on complicated subjects or difficult technological subjects, is you have to be really self-deprecating. Because if you stand up on stage and you're like, I got all the answers, like everybody
let
just
me tell you how smart I am.
Yeah. Everybody just goes, boo. They just shut off.
Yeah.
Right. And when you get up there and you go, hey, I have no idea what I'm doing. I just kind of like, tripped and fell into this and I've gotten lucky, but here's the things that I've learned from being beaten so many times. Right. It's
yeah.
Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah. They tend to be really, really receptive. So since I've really focused hard on kind of adopting that demeanor when I'm speaking, it's really shocking to me how well my presentations get received. But the thing that was super humbling to me, I had a CEO of a company that I was speaking for, who just this summer, who it was his conference, several $1 million for them to put it on, and I had this keynote slot, and he personally took a picture of me from the front row where he was sitting, and texted it to the CEO of my company, and said, "You have a world-class speaker on your hands. I hope you're using him well." And that I get a little emotional about that because I feel like I've got so much work to do and so much ground to cover from where I'm at right now in what I want to do with that type of activity and helping people understand that I go to be. I hope it's not a Heisman curse. Like I don't.
No.
Yeah, I don't need that pressure early on.
I think that's what world class people do, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I good to go back to a LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
Go ask LeBron if he thinks he's the best he's ever going to be, and he's one of the greatest basketball players of all time. And he's like, no, I need to work on this. I need to work on this.
And he's still practicing. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter how many times who's greater, Michael Jordan or LeBron James. There's still the yearning to know that no one gets great. They work at it constantly, even if they are one of the best.
Well, that goes back to the point that I made about the career guidance I've given my kids, which is, I think that folks like, sports fans are horrible because all we do is play the comparison game, right? And I think that the whole, LeBron and Jordan and I'm a big fan of Kareem. I'm just saying, that whole discussion is missing an extremely important point relative to how those athletes perform. They're not playing the comparison game, right? Yeah. It goes back to, am I being outstanding and exceptional in what it is that I do?
Yeah.
Right. I don't think that I'm sure that there's plenty of time in the media cycle where a guy like LeBron goes, okay, like, look, if you're going to ask me about stats versus stats or whatever, but I don't think there's ever a time when LeBron releases a shot from the floor that he goes, God, I hope this shot was better than Michael's best shot, right?
Zero chance.
Never, right? Yeah. It's like, because, by the way, no shot's ever been better than the skyhook, Kareem. I'm just saying. But there's this notion that, like you said, when you're in that zone, there's this notion of I'm constantly in need of improving. I'm constantly in need of practicing. I'm constantly in need of, but I'm really excited. I mean, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. I just couldn't be happier. And that's in trying to manage a lot of change and transition and the anxieties of the realities of my youngest, being gone, and I'm not that everyday dad in the morning anymore.
Yeah.
And then what else am I gonna shake up in my life, and in managing through all that, I'm still the happiest that I've ever been, I think.
That's great. It's kind of interesting that for someone who talks about how you don't know, in reference to there's somebody in the building, you don't know who it is, you don't know why they're there, but everything's okay, and the idea of like security and how you also construct that you're here by just mistakes. It's almost like you've kind of broken into the cybersecurity world not knowing what you're doing, and somehow succeeding at it. And at the same time, now people are asking you to share stories about how do you explain these things to us?
Yeah.
And not knowing.
Well, that's always fun, because I'll go back to what you said, what some of the best people in the world do. I just have been surrounded by so many people that when you walk down the hall in their office, and you just have a casual conversation with them, you have no idea that you're literally talking to one of the world's experts in this particular area or this particular domain. And it does go back to, I mean, everybody's, at the end of the day, nobody's special. Everybody is not, everybody's unique but not unique.
Correct.
And so you shouldn't be surprised that the person that you're talking to is an expert in their field. But the best ones, kind of like the idea that, when they talk about in financial planning, that, the millionaire is the guy next door that you would never know is a millionaire, right? Or a multimillionaire. The expert is the person that you would never know is an expert until, you're called upon to share that knowledge. And, I'd laugh because I get up and tell people, I'm not special. I don't have any secrets. There's nothing that I'm going to tell you that you're going to go, Eureka, I've never thought of that before. I said, but what I have had is that at one point in my career, I was running the largest security identity function in the world.
Yeah.
And I did it for a couple of years, and it was awful. It was really hard. It was lots and lots of, long hours, and when bad things happen, time away from my family and all those types of things. And the experience of doing that, I tell people it qualifies me to tell you the best approaches to consider, not what you should do.
Correct.
Because I took all those beatings and bruises and scars long before you did. Pardon me. And so that's the real value of this. I tell people that my career, excuse me. I tell people my career is really not this inside joke of stumbling and falling and not knowing what I'm doing, but what my career has really been has been the guy that hasn't been afraid to say, yeah, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I remember, let's get that out of there. There we go.
That's all right.
I remember early in my career in technology, I'm going to talk a little technology, plumber's talk here. I worked for a company called CheckFree that has become Fiserv now, and they did payment processing for consumers, and had a real great position in the market. And we were just at the beginnings of the internet, the consumer internet, in the late 90s. And I'm in a room, and there's all these folks in there that have been working there for years, and conversation goes around. They say, hey, look, we have got a company on the internet that wants to allow its customers to do bill payment, but they're not a bank. And back then, this is the plumber's talk. Back then, we had 64-bit encryption was the highest encryption that we had.
That was the tippy top.
That was it. That was it.
Right.
We were also still running on 15K modems, but
wow.
And somebody said in the room, they said, "Who wants this project?" And all the older people that had been there for years said, "Oh, no, it's not a bank. Doesn't have a bank's controls. We've got 64-bit encryption on the internet, and they do what? They share news stories? What? Nah, I don't want that job." And I was like, "I'll take it.
Yep.
I'll take it. I have no idea what you all just said, but I'll take it."
Yep.
And interestingly enough, the company ended up being America Online. And I was the program lead for the development of AOL Bill Pay initially, which became Yahoo Bill Pay, which became I was literally up to my eyeballs in the beginnings of the true consumer enabled internet.
Yeah.
And it was all because I said, "Hey, let's go do this.
Just say yes."
Yeah. And that's really the hallmark of my career, is never having a fear of taking on what others won't. The downside to that, I think, is for a long time in my career, after I really built up experience, is that that then combined with that personality characteristic that I talked about being a fixer, really set me up. In many places in the technology marketplace, I got to be known as the wolf. So from the Pulp Fiction movie, the Harvey Keitel's character who goes in and cleans up after, yeah. And that became a frustrating point for me because there's one thing, and I'll share this with anybody that wants career advice. The problem with being a fixer is that nobody cares about you after it's fixed. And
scary.
It gets difficult because when things are fixed and restabilized, then the reality of corporate America is that too much of our orientation from a management standpoint is towards what have you done for me lately.
Yeah.
And you go, well, I saved this major account, or I saved this thing that was capsizing from a functionality standpoint. And go, yeah, but that was then like what's
Did
going
you get
on
your
now?
check last week, last month?
Yeah. And that can be frustrating for somebody like me who has to learn through osmosis, because I can't I know my shortcomings and my incapabilities. I'm not the startup guy, right? I'm the guy that comes and fixes the startup after it's come off the rails in its second funding round, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not the innovator in terms of now as I've gotten a little bit older, there are things that I see and I go, that there's a hole in the marketplace where, I could see building something like this, but I'm still only capable of projecting it as an idea.
Yeah.
I need other people that have the skills and the capabilities that I don't. I like that actually, because it keeps me in a place where I remind myself that I'm not all that, right? I mean, I need other people to be successful.
Yeah.
And I'm loving it. It's just it goes back to I hope this golden phase lasts for quite a while, because I'm really, really enjoying it.
That's good, man. Well, I know it's almost 6:00, but man, I appreciate you coming by.
Not a problem.
And I know I know you do a lot of things for the city, Westerville City Schools, and that's always super good. I love Westerville City Schools. I think that they've done a great job. They've done great with my kids. I've got one in the ELC and one at Hawthorne, and I went to Hawthorne, and there's Richard Oxley.
Mm-hmm.
He's an old administrator, but he was like my second grade teacher, and I just remembered him, and I reached out to him on Facebook because there was just little teachers and moments and points in life where people see things in you, or they notice things about you, and later on in your life you're like, That's so true. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of projecting into the same thing I was saying earlier, where he would talk about Mr. Oxley. He told my mom, he goes, man, that kid's mind is always moving. Like, because I'm just constantly observing and waiting and just seeing what's going on with the room. And if I'm not talking, I'm listening because I'm paying attention because there's something going to happen and I want to be ready and prepared and have all my. I was internet downloading before internet downloading. No, but I appreciate all you do and best of luck in everything that you got going on moving forward. And I appreciate you opening up. I mean, I know it's probably easier for you now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you're right, man. That's tough. People don't know how to respond to those as people that know you, and they're just kind of cold behind. And
yeah. Well, I look at it this way. There have been, over the last few years, there have been hundreds of people that haven't been in a place where they were comfortable enough to talk to me. Because if they would have been, I would have shared many of the same things that we shared together today, right? And in a hope that it would not make them feel better. It's kind of abrasive, but I don't really care if they feel better.
Yeah.
Right. What my hope would be is that it would be something that they would gain some value from.
Sure.
Right? That they whether it's learning or understanding or whatever the case may be, and I just share it with them. So I find it's really for me it's therapeutic, but it's also necessary to just be open. And I do love the format of podcasts because it gives this opportunity for a real dialogue that's not, kind of staged and contrived and give me a script.
Yep.
And you can talk about stuff that is tangible and is interesting. And it's the same, as you were saying early on. My hope is that in just being able to be open about stuff that's really difficult for people to necessarily process or hear, then maybe there's some value in it for somebody. Maybe somebody, I don't really care what they think about me, right? If you go spend any time running for elected office, you quickly learn to grow a thick skin and not care what people think about you. What I care about is are they really maximizing the life and the moment that they have now? Because I think that the saddest thing that I've seen are those people that are not.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, life is meant for living and for the living, and that's what we need to be focused on. And if we're not, I keep a quote on my Facebook page that I don't know I'll ever take down. Shawshank Redemption. Andy Dufresne says, "Well, I guess you either get busy living or you get busy dying," and it's just so fundamentally true.
Yep.
That it applies to everything, and I just hope that, in being able to share with folks that they get busy living.
Awesome. Great parting words. Thanks, guys. One of my favorite things about this podcast is the opportunity to sit down with people like Richard. It's such a humbling experience. Helps you understand life. Because I always reflect a lot on my own and what I'm thankful for, what I'm thankful I've been through, to know that others are going through things as well, and it's all our job to rise up and overcome that, find a way to be better. But great conversation today. It's got to be one of my favorite podcasts. I'll see you guys next time.